which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have touched, the word of life.
Welcome to the amazing collection, The Bible for Women, book by book, and I'm so glad you could join us today. The book of Jeremiah is an incredible book, and Jeremiah is an incredible man. So it will be a treat for you to read about this man's great courage, his incredible faith, and his perseverance for God. When we come to the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah is a man who knows that destruction is near. He loves the people dearly. He is doing everything he can to turn them back to the ways of the Lord, and they will not listen. And so he has the pain of watching them take this path, and he will have the pain of seeing them absolutely destroyed in a horrible way. The book of Jeremiah was written by Jeremiah. He is the main character. He is all over the book. But like every book that we've studied, God really is the main character. It covers a period of time that is really the last 40 years of Judah. If you look in Kings 22 through 25, it's that historical area that Jeremiah is prophesying to. If you look in your workbooks, you will find that the first one there is King Josiah reigned 31 years and brought about a spiritual revival. When Jeremiah came on the scene, Josiah was king. And if you remember from our historical books, Josiah was the finest king Judah ever had. He loved the Lord, and he really single-handedly turned the whole nation from evil back to the Lord. And for his reign, which was 31 years, he got rid of all the idol worship. The nation prospered. Things were wonderful. And it was during this time that God appointed Jeremiah to speak. With King Josiah, one thing that was, I guess it's about the only mistake he ever made, during the last of his 31 years, Egypt was a world power. Egypt was to the west of Judah. The northern area was occupied by Babylon, and they were becoming more and more powerful. Egypt decided to take on Babylon, and so they started up the coast. When Josiah heard about this, he became afraid and took his army out to meet Egypt. There was a battle, and Josiah was killed in that battle. Egypt now decided that they were going to take over Judah and started marching to Jerusalem. At that time, the people raised up a second king. It was Josiah's son, Jehoahaz. Now, he was not the oldest son, he was the middle son, but the people chose him and put him on the throne. Let me just tell you something. It is not a good thing to be made king when one of the largest armies in the world is advancing on your city. And so it was really too bad for Jehoahaz. He was a king only for 3 months. When Egypt arrived, took him off the throne, sent him off to Egypt where he died, and they put the firstborn son on the throne, and his name was Jehoiakim. Now, wouldn't you think they could come up with different names? I tell you, like Frank, Bob, it would be so much easier to keep these guys separate, you know? But Jehoiakim was an evil king, even though he had a good father. And idol worship began to come back into the land in full force, and the people turned from the living God, and they turned to idols which are empty. Jeremiah says it so well. He said they went after empty things, and they became empty. He was a king for 11 years. He was paying tribute to Egypt, but he was very hard on the people. Not only did he tax them for their tribute, he taxed them because he decided he wanted to build a palace. Was there a palace for him? Absolutely. Was it good enough? Apparently not, because he started taxing the people and forcing them to build his palace. And Jeremiah really pronounces a curse on him for doing that very thing. After 11 years, he decides that he is going to rebel against Egypt. Egypt starts in, heads back up towards Babylon. There is yet another war. This time Babylon reigns. Babylon starts down to take over Jerusalem again about the time that Jehoiakim dies. Natural causes. And once more we have another king on the throne when a huge army is coming into town. Jehoiachin is now king. He is only king for 3 months. Babylon comes into town, takes him off to Babylon, and when they do, they take some of their finest men. In the first deportation, Daniel is taken away, along with all of the very finest men in Jerusalem. And you will read about Daniel very soon. The second deportation, Ezekiel is taken away. And so they are taking the finest from the land back to Babylon. Babylon puts King Zedekiah on the throne, and he is going to reign for 11 years, and he is not the smartest one in the region, I'm convinced. You would think these kings would start catching on that it's not a good thing to rebel against the person who's in charge. And yet he leads a rebellion also against Babylon, and after 11 years, even though there were prophets saying, don't go into battle with Babylon, surrender to Babylon. Jeremiah was speaking it so clearly. Zedekiah would not listen. And Babylon came down, laid a siege around the city. Now, here's what a siege is, in case you've forgotten. The army comes into town, they set their men up all around the city wall, and they just wait. They don't have to fight, because they are starving the people out. No food can come in, no water can come in, no goods can come in, no provisions. And if you just wait long enough, they're going to run out of food. 18 months. And at the end of 18 months, the people were killing their own children, their own babies, and eating them. Do you know it was exactly what God said in the book of Deuteronomy 2,000 years before? He said, if you turn from me, I will see to it that a nation will come down. They will live in your houses that you built. They're going to eat the goods of your land, the food of your land. They're going to lay a siege around you, and you will eat your own children. He said that 2,000 years before. It should have been a good warning. But as we have learned in this book, the people will not learn. And they were eating their own children. The wall was finally broken in July 586 BC. The Babylonians came in, and what was left of the people who had not died of pestilence and famine, now many were killed by the sword, just like the Lord had said would happen. The temple was utterly destroyed. That temple had stood for 400 years and represented God in the presence, in the center of Judah. And now the temple where they had put their hope was gone. That's what's taking place when our man Jeremiah is speaking to the people. It is a time of incredible upheaval, and it ends in a time of unbelievable destruction for the people in Judah. So who is this man Jeremiah? You will find that this little book has a lot to say about his life. Some of the prophets really just, you can't tell much about their life because they're not telling you. They're just prophesying. But in Jeremiah, you're going to learn a lot about him as a man. First of all, if you will open to the book of Jeremiah, right off the bat, Jeremiah tells you how this whole thing got started, and it's quite an unusual beginning, to say the least. In the beginning, he tells you the kings that he is a prophet during their time, that he is prophesying to all of these kings, and then he's going to give you an idea of how he became a prophet. God says in verse 5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, Jeremiah." Isn't that amazing? That even before he formed him, he knew him. "And before you were born, Jeremiah, I consecrated you. I have appointed you to be a prophet to all of the nations." This was not good news to Jeremiah. And he says, "Lord, I'm just a kid. I'm just a youth, Lord, not me. And besides, I can't speak." You see, he was asking him not to just speak to a few of his friends. He was asking him to speak to whole nations. And Jeremiah said, "Not me, Lord." You've heard that before. Remember Moses at the burning bush saying, "Not me, not me." And it's just amazing that we learned then, and we can learn today, that you should not argue with the living God because he is going to win. He wanted Jeremiah, and it was going to be Jeremiah who did the job. And God gives him some very good reasons. He said, "Everywhere I send you, you will go. Everything I tell you to speak, you're going to speak. And don't worry, Jeremiah, because I am with you to deliver you." Now that just seems to me the way God works. Don't worry about a thing, honey. If you've got the living God on your side, do not fear. He is with you, and he will deliver you. And that is exactly what he said to Jeremiah. Jeremiah came from a family of priests. And that also is a little hint as to why he really didn't want to be a prophet. You see, if you're a priest, it's really not a bad job, because your duties are very predictable. You know exactly what you're to do, and you can just do it every day. With a prophet, and Jeremiah knew the history of some of the prophets, you never knew what God was going to have you do, and some of the things God would have his prophets do were things that you wouldn't want to sign up for. And Jeremiah knew that. You know, the priests were there really to just make sure that the present ran smoothly. But a prophet was there to speak and change the future. This was a much harder job. The priests really took care of the things that were external. They're easy to do. But a prophet had to change man's heart. That was a lot harder. If you were a priest, you came from a tribe that was very respected. I mean, people thought a lot about you. But prophet came from all different tribes, and you were hardly ever respected. In fact, oftentimes you were hated. You know why? No one likes to be told that they're not doing right. Is that not the truth? Have you ever had a friend that was sinning? Let's say they're drinking too much. And you go to them and you say, "Honey, I think you're drinking too much." Chances are what they will do is laugh at you, tell all of their friends what a prude you are, turn the friends against you, and all of a sudden you've tried to do right and you've become the laughingstock of the neighborhood because you're really not with it. And that's exactly what a prophet had to do. He had to say to the people, "Turn back. You are sinning." And nobody likes to hear that. What people like is good news. And so that's just some of the difference between a priest and a prophet. Another thing is that a priest had a regular and good income, and a prophet never knew how he was going to make his livelihood. So when God comes and says, "I'd like you to be a prophet," Jeremiah had a lot of good reasons for saying, "Not me, sir. Can I just be a priest? I just like that job a lot." And yet God said, "No, you're going to be a prophet." Another thing God told Jeremiah, and I think this is especially painful. He told him he could not marry. He could not marry. He could not have children. He could not go to any celebrations, and he could not go to any funerals and mourn. Now you might think that's a little harsh, but let me just tell you that God knew what he was doing. You see, God was going to bring destruction on Jerusalem. And he knew that there would be famine, and there would be pestilence, and people would die. And he was sparing Jeremiah from greater pain. Don't marry, Jeremiah. Don't have children, they'll simply die. And when you go to a celebration, or don't go to celebrations, because this is not the time for celebrating, and do not mourn, because yes, people will die, but they will die because of their own foolishness. Do not mourn. You see, Jeremiah really had an incredibly difficult job. Jeremiah was a man who endured incredible persecution. Sometimes when I read this book, I do not know how he stood all he did. Because the people in his little town really didn't like him. His own family dealt treacherously against him. His own family. Those are the people you love and you should feel secure in their love. The men of Judah tried to kill him. The priest hated him and told the people he was lying. He was beaten at one point and put in stocks. Now all of this is happening to him because he is telling them that judgment is coming and they don't want to believe it. Let me tell you what beating and put in stocks means. You were stretched across the floor probably, or standing up, and your arms and your legs were stretched tight so the skin on your back was tight, and then you were beaten with a rod that would literally open up the skin on your body. This was incredible torture, very painful. If they went beyond 40 lashes, you might die, and so they wouldn't do that. They'd keep you alive, but you would be in great pain. After they had done that, they took this man and bent him over in two so that his hands were lashed to his ankles, and they left him there overnight. This is a great torture for this man. Another time, the officials were so angry at him that they threw him into a well where he sunk almost to the point of just dying in the well, and I'm sure he thought he was going to die in that well, and yet God rescued him. He was thrown into a dungeon. He was thrown into the guardhouse. You see, they were horribly cruel to a man who was speaking the truth. Jeremiah faced a lot of persecution. He was a man of great courage, but yet very tender emotions, and don't miss this about him. He is far from a hardened man. At one point he is at the temple and he's telling the people, if you do not turn back to the living God, he will bring judgment on this city and it will be destroyed. You can just hear him just crying, begging him to turn back. At which time, that is when he is beaten, he is thrown into those stocks. He comes out the next day, he faces his opponent, whose name is Pashur, and he says, you will be cursed because of this. He's still a man of courage. And then he goes away, and he gets with his God. And now you can just hear him, Lord, you have deceived me. My words that I speak, the people are against me because of the words I have spoken on your account, Lord. You have made me look foolish among the people. Lord, you have deceived me. And then he goes on and he says, but you know what, Lord? These words that you put into me are like a fire within my body. I have to speak them. I try not to talk about you. I try just to mind my own business, but they're like fire in me, and I have to speak. And then he goes on and he says, and I praise you, the living God. You see, he knew right where to go to when his heart was broken. And he knew right where to go to when he needed his face to be lifted up to something higher than the absolute misery that he was living in. He was a man of incredible courage and incredible tender heart towards the people. In the end, after Jerusalem has been destroyed, Nebuchadnezzar, who has come into town, had heard about Jeremiah. You see, right back in the first chapter, God had made a promise, and he said, Jeremiah, I'm going to deliver you. And sure enough, through Nebuchadnezzar sends the captain of his guard to Jeremiah, and here's what he says. I think this is hilarious. The Babylonian says to Jeremiah, your people are so stupid. Well, by now, we've gotten the good idea that these people are really stupid. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I can see those people in me. And he says, these people are so stupid, but Jeremiah, Nebuchadnezzar has a message for you. If you would like to come back to Babylon with us, you come on with us and you will live under the care of Nebuchadnezzar. Anything you want, Jeremiah, we will give to you. You know, this is an offer that I think I would have taken. Sign me up. I want to now be a pampered prince. I have been this prophet for so long. They have treated me so miserably. I can't stand to be here for another minute. Take me with you, Nebuchadnezzar. Put me in the palace. I want to go to the spa. I want a rest from these stiff-necked people. That's what I would have said. I tell you, it tells you so much about this man Jeremiah, because he would not say that, because the things that God loved were the very things that Jeremiah loved, and he says, leave me here. I want to stay in the land with these people who were left. Another group of people were taken back to Babylon. Zedekiah was with him, and that's where he died. Jeremiah stayed in the land, and the people who were left in the land were the poorest of the poor. These were not the bright ones. These were not the highly creative ones. These were not the educated ones. These were the poorest of the poor. They were left in the land, and Jeremiah says, I want to stay in the land and take care of these people. The last person who was over Judah was Gedaliah. And he was a governor. He had been appointed by Babylon. He was only in office a short time, and a rebel Jew killed him. And now all of the people who were left, this small group who were left, were afraid that Babylon was going to come down and really get them this time, now that they had killed the governor Babylon had set up. And so they all got together, asked Jeremiah what they should do. Jeremiah says, you know what? I have gone to the Lord. He goes to the Lord, and 10 days later, God comes back with the answer. I've gone to the Lord, and the Lord says, you stay here, and I will take care of you. And the people, showing their normal, natural, stupid ways, said, you're lying. We're going to Egypt. You see, those people always wanted to go back to Egypt. And so they go back to Egypt, and they take Jeremiah with them. While Jeremiah was still in Jerusalem, and things were very bad. The temple had been destroyed. The city was destroyed. Babylon had taken back all of the great ones. He wrote a letter to those people in Babylon. You see, he was still the prophet taking care of the people. And he said, while you are in Babylon, I want you to build houses. I want you to plant vineyards. I want you to settle in this place, because you're going to live there 70 years. While you're there, be a light. While you're there, cling to the living God. You will be there 70 years. You see, he told them they would be there 70 years. And you will find when we get to the book of Daniel, after they had been there about 67 years, read the book of Jeremiah, realized that they were getting close to coming back to the land, and indeed that is exactly what happened. Remember, when God says he's going to do something, count on it. He will do it. So what is Jeremiah's message Well, if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm going to tell you one more time. During Josiah's reign, Jeremiah condemned Judah because they were worshiping and wanted to worship false gods, and he promised that God would bring judgment. His message is judgment. B, during Jehoiakim's reign, Jeremiah promised judgment because the people were so rebellious still against the living God. During Zedekiah's reign, he urged Judah, listen to this, he urged Judah to surrender to Babylon. God said, if you surrender, I will take care of you. And they would not do it, and so he promised judgment on the land. That was Jeremiah's message. During Gedaliah's rule, Jeremiah ministered to those who were left in Jerusalem. He was still caring for them. His message had now changed. It was not judgment anymore. It was, God will take care of you. Let me minister to you through God's words. Jeremiah predicted the coming Messiah. How is Jesus Christ concealed in this book? Jeremiah says God is going to send to Israel a righteous branch, and he will be called the Lord of righteousness. And when he is king of Judah, there will be peace. And lastly, one thing Jeremiah did is he prophesied against 10 nations. Remember in the beginning, when God calls him to be a prophet, he says, you're going to speak to many nations. Well, he wasn't kidding, because Jeremiah, this tender-hearted prophet, prophesies to 10 different nations.